Alright, so I took a look at that other video and I want to make a few changes just to make it a little bit easier. I'm going to bump up the size of the code here, make it a little easier to see. And we left off here on line 110 that is. I'll bump it up even more and make it super big. Okay, here's where I want to pick up. So I want to point out here on line 113, I'm going to turn off the word wrapping here. So I'm going to go to View and then uncheck word wrap, and that way I think it'll be a little bit easier to see. Sometimes the line wrapping makes it hard to read the code. But anyways, what we're going to talk about now is that variables can hold different types of data. So I've got a bunch of different variables that are being declared and initialized over here. But if you take a look at what the values are that they're being initialized to, they're different types of data. So right here I've got a number. Here I've got text. And actually, if you have text data in programming languages, they're called strings. So here I've got a string. Here I've got a Boolean value, and we know from previous stuff that a Boolean value is either true or false. And then we'll talk about these two other data types in a little bit, but let's just focus on numbers, strings, and Booleans for now. Numbers are pretty straightforward. A number is a number. In JavaScript, all numbers are the same. In some languages, there's different types of numbers. There's numbers with decimal points, there's big numbers and little numbers, and you have to be really careful about how you specify the type of data that you want your number to be. But the nice thing for us is that in JavaScript, all numbers are just considered numbers. So if you want to use a number, you can declare a variable, give it a variable name, and assign a value of a number to it. All right, let's go down to line 117 here. So let me ask you this here. So first of all, if you want a variable to contain text or to contain a string, you have to use these quotes on either side of the value. So I could either, I'm using double quotes here, but I could use single quotes on both sides if I wanted to. But let's see what happens. What do you think JavaScript is going to think if I don't put the quotes there? It's going to get confused because it'll think that this is some variable up above, and it'll try and figure out what the value of that variable was and assign that value to this variable. So you can see how JavaScript would get confused, and that's why when we want to use strings, we have to put quotes around them. Okay. If your data type is a Boolean, if you want your variable to store a Boolean data type, you can assign either a value of true or false to it. And notice that if I did this, JavaScript would think that I'm storing a string instead of a Boolean. But because it's a Boolean, I can just type in true or false without the quotes around it. Now objects, we'll talk a little bit more about those later, but it's very important to understand objects, but I'm just going to skip that for now. Okay, so we've got a bunch of different variables here, and they're each storing a different type of data. They have different data types. So if you go down to line 124 here, I'm going to remove the comment on 124 and the closing comment on line 130. And I want to show you that you can use this special keyword in JavaScript to find out what the data type is of a variable. So right here I'm just doing alert, and then inside the parentheses I've got type of, and then a variable name in each one of these cases. So let's just save this and run the code once. Oops. What's going on here? There we go. Move the console down a little bit and refresh, and you can see that that first variable, the data type is a number, so I hit OK. The second variable, the data type is a string. The third variable, the data type is a Boolean, and then we've got an object, and then we'll see object one more time here, but I'm going to defer on the object and the array data type. So I just want you to know that you can use this type of operator to check and see what data type a variable is storing, because you may not always know. You might be looking at somebody else's code and you don't know where they declared the variable. You just have it and you need to work with it, but you're not sure what type of data it is, so you can use this type of keyword to figure out what it is. Type of is a special keyword in JavaScript. Every language has a bunch of words that are reserved that have special meaning, and type of is one of those words in JavaScript, and so is var, by the way, and we've seen that we use var to declare variables. Alright, I just want to point out here, notice by the way I put the comments back in on 124 and 130, so we're done with those alerts. We don't need to see them anymore. Okay, here I've got on line 135, I've declared a variable, and let me ask you this, what is the value here? The value is 2, right? But now let me ask you this, what is the data type? The data type is a string, and I know that because there's quotes on either side of the value, so that makes it a string. So it looks like a number, but really it's a string. So I just want to show you what happens if I add different types of data together. So right here on line 136, I'm declaring a variable named result, and I'm assigning it an expression. So the value of result is going to be whatever we solve this expression out to be. So it's going to be some number plus some other number. Now up above, we declared some number up here on line 116, and we set it to 7, and that is a number, it's not a string. But we're adding some other number which has a value of 2, but it's a string. So it might make sense for you to think that result, when this expression gets solved, you might think that 7 plus 2 equals 9, but that's not the case. What we'll see here, let's alert out result and see what happens. Save it, go back to the page, refresh, and instead of seeing 9, I'm seeing 72. Well, that seems kind of weird because 7 plus 2 seems like it should be 9, but we got to remember that 2 was actually a string and not a number. So the rule here is that in JavaScript, if you add variables that have different data types in them, for example, if you add a number and a string, JavaScript is just going to convert everything to a string and then add them together. And when you add strings together, they just get combined together, and concatenated is the word for it, and we'll talk about that more later too. But so that's why we're seeing 72 instead of 9 in here. So the point is that when you're adding different data types together, you might get some unexpected results. Alright, I think I'm going to move past this. We'll talk about objects later. So I'm gonna skip down to, we'll talk about functions next. So yeah, we'll come back to this a little bit later, but